Hi everybody, it's Evelyn. Most of you know me doing twin flame reads or doing my bi-monthly sign reads, doing tarot cards. But in my messages that I get in my twin flame reads, I often get guided by my guides to research things. And FeFe and co-FeFe kept coming up this week. So I was guided to do some research today, in addition to what I've already learned about co-FeFe. And by the way, I first learned about co-FeFe from Charlie Freak, and I think that was on either Laura Eisenhower's channel on YouTube or Jen McCarty's channel. I forget whose it was exactly because they meet together on different channels. But he was the first one I really learned a lot about co-FeFe, and he was talking about not only the alloy that it is, because co-FeFe is CO, which is cobalt, and the V, which is vanadium, and then FeFe is 2 parts iron. So that's medical terminology, and that's what it is. It's got lots of different acronyms, but that is the one that was posted, I believe. So that's one of the definitions of co-FeFe, and I learned that from Charlie Freak, but he said there were 4 parts. And I remember one of the other parts of co-FeFe, as far as the coding from Q and all that, was coming up as "in the end we will win," which is the definition of the word, right, coming from different languages. And that came up from the Great Deluge, but wasn't then used after the Great Deluge. So in the end we will win. And as well as in Arabic, it was coming up as "I will stand up." And then the third part of the co-FeFe, and by the way, we're talking about cobalt, which is cobalt blue. But I was also guided to do this in the first place because in a read I did for myself yesterday, the word woad came up, W-O-A-D, which is a plant that you make blue dye out of, just like cobalt. And it's like a weed, but it has a yellow flower on it. But it was coming together with other things because, remember, we have blue dye here. We're talking about cobalt blue with cobalt. And then we've also talked a lot about blue apples regarding the olives in the south of France. And I was also getting energies of underwater, like seaweed type things. And here we have a weed that's like algae. So like algae type things were coming up here as underwater plants. And the reason that was coming up was because, and there was another few parallels here, just like adrenochrome, which is the third part of the co-FeFe thing, just like the adrenochrome comes from causing extreme fear in children or babies in order to cause the adrenaline rush, right? And then the epinephrine. The extreme fear was also coming up in a talk from one of the doctors in selling their meds. I forget what his name is, but there's an advertisement that I noticed today, which I actually had seen before, about how the olive trees in Morocco are the best because they live in fear, right? Because the desert really isn't the place where olive trees like to live. So the ingredient in them that is most helpful for health and keeping your weight down had to do with hydroxytyrosol. And the amount of that is compounded in the Moroccan olive trees because they're basically in starvation mode, just like the fear mode of the babies. So there's a theme here about how to get the best ingredients into things is by causing them to go into fear. So in parallel to the olive trees being in fear and the adrenochrome from the fear of babies, there's some kind of underwater plant that they're guiding me to, but I'm not sure which it is. I'm definitely getting algae type things, blue algae, but perhaps with yellow flowering on it. And also before I forget this too, the underwater places were coming up from a read I did a long time ago, because I get randomly guided to this stuff because I'm not political. I'm not looking for this stuff. But when I'm doing my read for the Twin Flames, my guides will send me to these places to search this information. And one of the searches led me to and it had to do with Illuminati areas like Venice. And there's something here about the underground water, right? Because the water in Venice is very bad right now. And there's something, whatever lives or survives in that bad water is going to produce an ingredient of living in starvation or in a very toxic area that makes it produce something it wouldn't normally produce. So there's something coming up here, and I believe that they were harvesting something like that that we don't know about yet. I mean, part of that is the adrenochrome, but I think there's other plants out there they've been experimenting with and or using that we don't know about. So it has to do with, specifically, it was coming up C as an SEA, FeFe, in from my coding this week. So it's literally something under the sea in a toxic sea area where the plant's growing, and because it's a toxic environment, like the olive trees in Morocco, they have an ingredient that's sought after. So again, the blue apples of the south of France and the olive trees, and then the olive trees in Morocco, and now going to underwater plant. I don't know if there's actually olive trees that grow under the water or in oceans, or boy, jacaranda trees are coming up too again. I haven't thought about them in a long time, but there's something about jacaranda trees that has come up in the past that has some kind of healing qualities to it. I don't know much about the jacaranda trees as far as natural cures, but there's definitely something there as well. So for those of you who research that kind of thing, please let me know in the comments if there's anything you know about those things. When I brought up Kofifi, so we have the alloy, the metal that's going to protect us from the 5G, okay, and that has to do with the Tesla stuff too, right? Tesla's ideas. So the Kofifi alloy is what's going to protect us from the waves of 5G. The quote, "In the end we will win," or "I will stand up," but either way, from the great deluge, the great flood. And so tidal waves may be coming up, and tidal waves were coming up in my message this week. The adrenochrome is the third thing, C9H9NO3. So carbon 9, I'm assuming, hydrogen 9, and then nitric oxide 3. Again, adrenochrome is oxidated adrenaline, which is epinephrine. And then the fourth thing I found here, I never knew what the fourth thing was. I don't think that Charlie Freak said at that time, but what I came across in my research today, was about Trump's grandfather and a rare butterfly, a shining star, the Prince of Power of Air, which for me, I was getting the breath, right? The breath of life. And then when I watched the Christmas Chronicles this week, which I told you about, number 1 and 2, I ended up watching both of them. One of the things in the Christmas Chronicles was an almond-shaped flower, a toy that Santa had made, like a lotus, opening up with a flower that comes out, and then it comes out and flies around and makes lights, and then in the lights says the word believe. And it's very much about the pineal gland. But what was coming up regarding Trump's grandfather was an old story. Let's see where that story is about his grandfather. Here it is. And this was from saltradioministries.com. So there was a Sephardi rabbi, a Yiddish rabbi, tale, where he was called to find and destroy a mythical and rare butterfly known as Ben Sharisa, or the Lucifer butterfly, and has other names: Hillel ben Shahar, the shining star, and this is from Isaiah 14:12 and Ephesians 2:2, where Satan is called the prince of the power of the air. The magic butterfly, and then that reminded me about the magic butterfly release in Christmas Chronicles 2, which again is that transformation energy. And in the story, he finally finds the baron who has the butterfly, who then acts as the rabbi in the head in the end. So the connection to Trump here is that Karlstadt in Germany, or Kasselstadt was the original name in the story, and then Karlstadt, Germany is the birthplace of Trump's grandfather. who came to America in 1896 and had advised his kids, according to this article, know what you want in life and follow your dream, but never get distracted by FeFe. Okay, because that's part of the story, which in another language was KABFeFe, KABFeFe. Basically, the Baron calling the rabbi an idiot in search of nothing, because he already had it, and why would he tell him, or why would he give it to him, and then he killed the rabbi? So anyway, the place of the story was the place where Trump's grandfather was born. And Trump's grandfather was written to say that he advised his kids, know what you want and follow your dream, but never get distracted by FeFe. So Trump may have known this word all of his life, which is pretty cool. All right, so what else was coming up here? Oh, the funny bone is connected here too. It was very interesting because we have the definitions, and I always break all the words down. And there's another relationship of FeFe to coffee, because literally when I looked up FeFe, the first definition came up for FeFe, but under coffee. I don't know if it was a cover, a code type thing, but it was literally the word coffee, and then the definition for FeFe came up. But it was reminding me that John Coffey in the movie was, he was psychic, and it was very much about the pineal gland as well. And then if you look up the definition for FeFe, COV, everything that comes up automatically when you put it in the search line comes up as covert or covet, conform, conflict, covenant, and COVID came up. So connected to FeFe right away came up as COVID, which is COV with ID, so identifying COV, which is the covenant, or the covert operations, right? But COVID also means foot or chi, which is life force. The foot was very interesting coming up because it came up in another way as well today. There's something important about the foot, which can be the bottom of the sea as well. But the grandfather is also another definition for COVID, and here the grandfather came up in the story about FeFe. Fire and water come up as a definition for COVID, as well as house, a limb, so here the foot is also a limb, and the seed. And the elbow comes up here as well. And the funny bone has come up for me before because it's in one of the cards, and they're always giving me a hit about that. COVID also means genus and disperse. It also means cubit, which is the length from the elbow to the fingertip of a man's arm, which is approximated at about 1.5 feet, which is 18 inches or 19 inches, which is the sun and the moon, and COVID-19. So there's all these parallels here regarding FeFe and COVID-19. And then Mike Rothschild came up in my searches saying he's not a Rothschild of the Illuminati family, but that he was a debunker of claims, right? So it was just funny that he came up as his name being Rothschild, and then he gives a list of all of the Illuminati families, which one of which is the Rothschild. So there's all these parallels and crossovers. So cobalt means goblin, elf, or evil spirit. So here I just watched a movie with elves in it, and then evil spirit came up for cobalt as well. And iron is actually soft, not hard, but if you add carbon to it, it becomes steel. And here we are going from carbon DNA to crystalline DNA. So then vanadium is a bluish silver steel additive, and also means the goddess of beauty. So we have something soft that needs carbon to become hard, the iron, and then the goddess of beauty to cover it up, because we also have evil spirit here of the cobalt blue, the elf and the goblin. So in addition to FeFe coming up, because around the same time I learned about FeFe, I also got a hit in my downloads about the Knights of Columbus CC, which was in Euclid, Ohio, which I just happened to come across in a corporation page from, I think it was 1973, it was 71 or 73, But at the same time, I came across an invoice coming into New York, the government office of New York. I think it was on its way to Connecticut. It was literally an invoice for an order of pineal glands. The same year of the incorporation of the Knights of Columbus, specifically to this Euclid, Ohio one, this CEE, Euclid CEE, the Knights of Sea, SEA, the ocean. So there's a connection here between the pineal glands and the Knights of Columbus. It was the same year that they incorporated there in Ohio. So there's all these weird connections. I just want to make sure on this page there's nothing else. So the incorporation of the Knights of Columbus, Ohio, the CEE and Euclid, and then the import invoice of pineal glands in 1973 or 71, whichever year it was. I'm not sure I'm not sure if the invoice said where it was coming from. It had very little information on it, but I know it was going to a state office in New York, and I think it was headed towards Connecticut. But if you also, for me, when I break down words, for FeFe comes out as, because remember, FeFe, we were just talking about PHI, as in phi, and expansion and contraction of phi. I said phi or FeFe is Sophia, so-phi. So it's coming up as Sophia again. So FeFe is literally, because V for me is creation, and we have CO first, it's co-creation of Sophia, the connection. So Sophie, and then A is the human connection. So it's the co-creation with Sophie, or Sophia. So that was really cool the way that came up. So there's a couple things I did want to touch on from the research that I did today. And one of them was that story about Trump's grandfather, which I told you about. And some of the other places I went to find some of the information. So something came up in my search, which I wasn't looking for, was top executive of the Knights of Columbus abruptly resigns amid fraud lawsuit. This was from ChristianTimes.com. It was an article. And as soon as I opened this article, I was rerouted to a porn site. But when I closed it right away, and then I went back in, but after that I couldn't go back. So some kind of every so many hits, you get rerouted to a porn site. I don't know how they handle that, but I couldn't get back into the same site, because then I wanted to see what it was, so I could get the address, but I couldn't get back in again. So again, it was the website was ChristianTimes.com, and the title was Top Executive of Knights of Columbus Abruptly Resigns Amid Fraud Lawsuit. And as soon as I went into that, I was rerouted to a porn site of someone masturbating. So that was ChristianTimes.com. And again, I couldn't get back into that site that I was rerouted to after the first try. So I don't know how that works. But then there was fraud and breach of contract, June 2018, where Smith, or Thomas P. Smith, had received almost $900,000 in 2016 compensation. And he was the Knight of Columbus Chief Insurance Officer. And he joined in 1974, which is very close to 1973, which I was just referencing. Another header that came up was Knights of Columbus faces accusations of self-dealing amid insurance fraud lawsuit, which I just quoted. And this is from the dailycaller.com. And this was August 28, 19. And Carl Anderson, the Supreme Knight's son, but also considered a Supreme Officer from the Knights of Columbus, it was KOFC1333.org, was also coming up from Westchester, PA, which was very interesting, separate from the Supreme Officer. And you notice that KOFC is very similar to KFC, which also came up. Someone was talking about KFC and McDonald's today, and how they use the human babies in the hamburgers at McDonald's as well. That was coming up. So now, the medicine that we use, the epinephrine, is not the same as the live source. That's why, if you ask in the medical community, it doesn't produce the benefits that you do when it's live. So, and it literally says under Wikipedia, the en.m.wikipedia, in vivo, which is in the live source, it's produced by oxidation of adrenaline, which then becomes the epinephrine. and the derivative is the carbazochrome, which they use as a hemostatic medication to stop bleeding. And then they give you the in vitro, which is the outside the body. They use silver oxide as the oxidizing agent. The solution is pink, but when it gets more oxidation, it becomes brown or black with the melanin compounds. So there's lots of studies done, and the reason why it came up, the source of the babies and the adrenochrome, was that in, there's a lot of research in the 50s and 60s, specifically 52, with Hoffer's work. Well, actually, Hoffer's work was coming up in 1973, which is that same year. You see the parallels where they just lead me to this stuff, and they all connect. He was working on vitamin C and niacin combinations, high doses of vitamin C, regarding schizophrenia, but they couldn't find adrenochrome actually in the schizophrenic patients. But there was a lot of research about it. And then in the book Legal Heights, like DMT, and that was the spinoff, .co.nz. In the early 2000s, Discovery produced, it was produced normally as an intermediate in formation of neuromelanin because it is detoxified, at least partially, by glutathione-S, which comes up Sophia, but it's also sulfur, transferase. Some studies found defects in the gene for this enzyme that I just stated. The glutathione-S transferase, however it's pronounced, okay? So at the book in 1954, The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, mentioned that the effect of it was like mescaline intoxication. And then in 1962, there was the novel Clockwork Orange came up, which was quoted Drenchrome, Drencrom. And then 1971, the Hunter Thompson book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where they quoted only the one source for this stuff, the adrenaline glands from a living human body, and it's no good from a corpse. But actually, they talk about the adrenal gland, but actually from the last source I went to was scarenormal.com. It was a really good source about the adrenochrome. So they stated the body cannot deal with the sudden increase of the iron from the stimulation and the ions that can affect the heart and the brain and be fatal. They like the adrenochrome from less than age 9 because it's more potent in that age, but also the most fear of the children to extract the potent adrenaline epi from their pineal gland. And they literally would extract the epi from the pineal gland with a needle through the eye, literally, and would keep the children alive for multiple extractions to excrete the adrenaline and the epi from the brainstem. So kids especially have a huge spike of adrenaline from the pineal gland. And something came up this from the ancient history too, about them wanting the source of between life and death, of extreme fear. I just talked about that last week or the week before. It came up totally separate from this. The effect of it is a euphoric effect, a mania, a depersonalization, a lot of masturbation apparently, and then body dysmorphia and an increase in the senses overall. I'm sure there's other effects too, but those were some of the things that came up. And it's as addictive as heroin, and the withdrawal is worse than any of the other hard drugs. The problem with it, and why it's connected to FeFe, which is that alloy that's going to protect us from the 5G, is the iron production. Because it gives them a blast of iron, the high, and then when they go through withdrawal, they lose iron because they are taking this drug. It shuts down the natural production of the adrenaline, so it can increase the iron count in blood fatally, and then in the withdrawal depletes them of iron, and they feel like really, really crappy. So it induces that fight or flight and accelerates the iron, and yet then depletes the iron in withdrawal, which is, the double whammy there, because they then feel really crappy. They won't feel normal anymore. So that was some of the information that came up around that. And again, that year, 1973. And then it was interesting too, the flower of the Aster came up the other day. I forget what it was in reference to. Oh, that's right. In the splitting of the cell, the Asters came up. But Aster was one of the family names that came up in the Illuminati list as well, but spelled differently, Astor. So there was another parallel right there. Yeah, so again, another site, conspiracyfandom.com, was just talking again that it's a very potent extract of the excitatory, being excited, processes of adrenochrome. Microscopic quantities of the live substance of this directly ingested can be fatal to humans. But in alien consciousness, so, here we have, they get off on it. The more the better. So if there is draconian or that kind of, if it's I'm just blanking out, sorry about that. But if it's a draconian race, not lizard, but you know what I'm talking about. I just can't think of the word. If the human is part not human, all right, so one of the ET races, then it's not as effective, it's not as harmful to them, and they actually thrive off of it. But it's only catalytically effective when obtained from still living subject. And then from John's New Place, JONS, newplace.wordpress.com, just going on to state that it wasn't approved for human use, but that's the drug, not the live source of it. And then some stuff in that website was coming up about Tom Hanks and what was he doing on the Gold Coast while filming for 4 months. And so now here we're on the Gold Coast, which is Morocco. And I was just talking about the olive trees in Morocco and the starvation of the olive trees, which they would know about that, right? So, and it's been commercially available from Wuhan in China for many years, which is where COVID-19 originated. And this website also said they harvest from some 800,000 children missing in the US every year. And then there's a couple proof videos on this channel, and all of these videos have been removed. And from YouTube, if they were YouTube videos. Yeah, the YouTube account was said it was terminated because I posted a video of proof of this. That they also stated on this website, John's New Place, WordPress.com, that COVID is a globalist ploy that failed and hijacked by Trump to be used as a cover to keep people inside and prevent collateral damage during the military op of the mass arrests of all of the underground kid stuff. Some targets are very violent and will fight back, so people would stay safe inside. Arrests in Southern California now, and this article was posted March of 20 when it first came out, the COVID stuff. And there was 160,000 people in 90 days, included mainstream media and Barry Soetoro, Antifa, MS-13, Mafia, drug gangs, and other mercenaries. Hidden perhaps by Soros and used by the Democrats and deep state. This was the article that was coming up on here. Thousands have already been arrested in Italy in this bust, the military bust. And they were also quoting that there will be a financial reset and end of dollar, a petrodollar, and assets of the criminal banksters, the Rothschilds, and the committees, etc., are being seized. And actually, it's cool that seize came up because in my reading for today that I haven't done yet, seize the day was coming up in my code line. So the IRS and the feds will be abolished, only paying consumption taxes between 7 and 15%, which I've definitely heard before. And then secrets exposed of medical breakthroughs, alternative energies, and ET life will all be coming out, which they have been this year. Everyone will get credit card for their free energy devices, and never have to pay electric company again. So this was someone quoting because he'd spoken to a friend of his who he'd known for 5 years. The same stuff being reported from QAnon and X22 from someone he's known for 5 years who was a retired Spec Ops Marine. Okay, so this was someone like a first-hand report of what was going on, why Trump was using this as a cover-up so that the military could get in and get all the kids out from the tunnels and from all of this other trafficking going on. So there was another site. Yeah, and then Iron Man just came up in my read too. And here we have FeFe with Iron. So Iron Man was coming up again regarding that. And oh, well, on a site called Starship Earth, thebigpicture.com, with CIA child snuff survivor. There was a video about her speaking, and I can't confirm it's real or not, but this was a girl speaking about her rape and torture on the porn that they were, that they had to participate in. It was an underground site in Central Texas, so she was a survivor of it, in Austin, Texas, which was so weird because then right after her video, I ended up in a video by Holly Austin Smith. So Austin came up twice here, and her video is on YouTube, so you can watch that one. I actually posted that on my Facebook. So she was stating that there was an underground trafficking ring in Central Texas, and Austin was 45 minutes from where her home was, where they took her to. It was farmland, but she said it was mostly underground. She spent 17 years there. There were thousands of murders, mostly black kids. They called it Uncle. They have lots of jokes that they have between each other. It's really awful. Uncle Sam's Snuff Factory, which was a private joke, she said. It was also a genocide factory, and she called it Hell on Earth. But it's not just in the U.S., it's all over the world. But she said there's no place like Uncle Sam's for the right price, by the menu, and by females as well, right? The higher up females, where they cooked kids. They called it Cannibal's Kitchen. She was born into, the reason why she still survived was because she was born into an organized crime family that was involved with the CIA as well. So they felt that her DNA was really perfect for penetration or perpetuation because she could be trusted because of her DNA in order to grow up and be violent and to be a leader of the group for more and further. And they kept her for experimentation in reference to that as well. So she was talking about children being boiled alive in crap and piss, and then children cut up and fed to the other kids for sexual gratification. This was August 5th, 19. She didn't expect this to end. She was asking us to please do what you can. She knows that not everyone can come in and rescue them from these underground places, but she didn't expect this to end or be found out. And then she just literally was randomly saying, unless World War III or an epidemic broke out. And this was from August last year. So this was before the epidemic. All right. This is coming from her. And then I watched a video from the same site coming up for Holly Austin Smith about how she was dragged into the sex trafficking ring as a child. And she shared her story. That was a YouTube video. She was from South Jersey, a survivor of the trafficking. So you can check that out if you want. Holly Austin Smith and her story, and that's on YouTube. So yeah, and it was just going through the cobalt definitions again, which I already brought up. And also CO-60, CO-60 is a radioactive tracer and gamma ray source. Again, the cobalt coming from a German word, cobalt or kobold, meaning goblin, elf, or evil spirit. But again, those are the FeFe is our alloys. metal alloys. So something else that came up was there's so many names for the COFEFE. It's FE, COV, COV, FE, COV, FeFe, V, COFE, FEVCO, etc. And also coffee it came under, but it's also called the white rabbit because the molecule looks like a rabbit. And the literal medication, the legal medication is carbazochrome. Then they were guiding me to, because we're talking about the adrenal gland and iron, I was being guided to the relationship between the two. And then DHEA and cortisol were coming up. So of course, if you're stressed out all the time, it's going to tax your adrenal gland, which causes adrenal fatigue. But those are the two things they look for in medicine if you have fatigue issues, is your adrenal status and your iron status. And it's important not only to look up your iron, but ferritin, because that's how your body stores iron. And that was coming up from a couple different websites I was looking at. Where is it? One was Nature. Oh, betternutrition.com I was looking under, and nature.com as well. But also pumpkin seeds was coming up as a really good source of iron. But those are the places they would look for fatigue and depletion. And so here's, again, that relationship between COFEFE of iron and then the adrenochrome, which is the adrenal gland, and then, of course, the source of the pineal gland, which excretes the adrenaline at fear, at death. Also something that came up here was, it was really important, cholesterol, not to have low cholesterol, and especially that's the good cholesterol, because that's where the progesterone and the DHEA comes from in order to produce the testosterone and estrogen, which is really important. And of course, it gets taxed because of the stress of cortisol when you're under stress all the time, the fight or flight. It's meant to be there for certain occasions, but not on a perpetual basis, which is what most humans have an issue with now because they're under a lot of stress all the time. So another thing that comes up with the pedophile codes, walnut is a way, it came up twice here, walnut is the way that the adrenal glands are described, right, the size of a walnut, but walnut is also code for the pedophile codes for African American children. It's really gross, but those, I want to tell you some of the codes that were coming up here. That one of those sites I was under was c-vine.com. And then this was a YouTube from, it was called Black Adrenochrome, aka Walnut Sauce, which is a sick joke. And here, a woman was posting this information. She was trying to portray to the black population the importance of this. And there was a picture of a brain and comparing it to the walnut because they look the same. And then it was Divine Awakening and Ascension. That was the YouTube site, Divine Awakening and Ascension. The pedophile codes were hot dog for a boy, pizza for a girl, cheese was for a very young girl, chicken and pasta was a very young boy, a map was semen, and then again the walnut was the African American child, and ice cream was the male prostitute, handkerchief was black S&M, and I couldn't read the white child, something under rag or something, and then sauce literally means orgy. So that was kind of gross stuff, but I wanted to put it out there so you'd understand those words if you ever hear them. And then also, they were also claiming on the site that that CPS, or Child Protective Services, and Planned Parenthood were some of the main contributors to the trafficking issues. And there was a preference for the adrenochrome from the black children and Asian children. All right, so yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have about that. So I'm going to do my my read today too for the twins, but before I go to, I opened my book, The Most Holy Trino Sophia of the Comte de Saint Germain. All right, so I don't know if you can see, here's the book. Okay. And I opened it to a certain page to see if there was anything I was being guided to. And it guided me to the 12 signs of the zodiac and their meaning under this book, which I'm going to read to you. It was coming up page 108 and then 107, where it started. So Saint Germain chiefly employs alchemical symbols in this book of the threefold wisdom. This no way infers that he's actually writing of the chemical processes, for, as the most of the great alchemists have agreed, the manufacturing of material gold is the least part of their science. That Saint Germain's meaning may be clear, and the correlations between the zodiac signs and the alchemical processes become evident. The following table will prove useful. And I haven't read this yet, so this is all new to me. So Aries lists calcination, the expulsion of the animal's soul through heat, purification by the fire of aspiration. Taurus is listed as congelation, or congelation, the union of parts, the achievement of one-pointedness or purpose. Gemini lists fixation, the condition of becoming firm, the fixing of the will. Cancer lists dissolution, to dissolve or to suspend in a fluid state, the universalizing of the personality. Leo is listed as digestion, to soften by heat and moisture, to perfect the mind in wisdom, in parentheses heat, and imagination, in parentheses humidity. Virgo is listed as distillation, the separation of the volatile principle from substance, the release of the soul from its involvement in bodily limitation. Libra is sublimation, sublimation, the refining of elemental bodies, the increasing of the vibratory harmonies of the body. Scorpio lists as separation or putrefaction, the philosophic death, an artificial decay by which the spiritual and material elements are separated from each other. Sagittarius is incineration, the burning away of dross. The soul fire consumes the external body. Capricorn is listed as fermentation, the conversion of organic substance into new compounds by a ferment, the building of the golden man. Aquarius is listed as multiplication, the process of increasing, adeptship. This is Aquarius, and we're going into the age of Aquarius. So multiplication, the process of increasing, expanding, being good at something. Okay, the process of being good at something. And then Pisces is listed as projection, the process of transmuting base substance into gold, the perfection of the work, the immortality, because then Pisces crosses over to the other side. In the Eastern tradition, Buddhahood is the Pisces energy, which we're moving away from into the Aquarius, the multiplication process. So it's very interesting. So let me know if that was helpful, if you're interested, or if there's anything that you need to add to that in the comments. Please share the information about the FeFe. I'd really appreciate your help with that. And as always, guys, rise and be love. It was just 43:44. Rise and be love, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.